Hello and welcome, everyone. We'll just give a moment for everyone to connect to the session, to the webinar. Right. Hello again. Welcome to this masterclass on applying to the Oxford Masters in Applied Financial Economics. We're going to try and take you through a bit of some of the tips on how you can apply to this program and what we're looking for. And just so you're aware, I'm joined today by Akbar Hussain. He is a senior admissions advisor like me, and Joe Nicholson, our head of recruitment, is also on the call. So just move to the next slide here. Right, so just a bit of housekeeping to start off. This is being recorded and this will be shared with you within a few days of us finishing. So yeah, just be patient. If you've registered, we will automatically send you that recording. It's not instant, but after a few days, once we've had time to look through the sort of subtitles or the closed captioning, we can share that. And we will open a Q&A at the end of the session, but for the first part, we're just going to present and then Q&A is saved for the end. So please, if you have any questions as we're going along, just make note of them and then we'll address those at the end of the presentation. If you have a question that is quite specific to you, you can address them to the MAFE admissions inbox. And if that question is kind of related to whether you think that you're actually a good fit for the MAFE, if you're a bit unsure, we're also going to share Joe's email at the end of the presentation, and he's the one who can kind of have a more detailed conversation with you about, whether your profile is a good fit for the program. Whereas the admissions inbox is great if you have a question about our application requirements or the technical aspects of the application form. So again, we'll reiterate that when the emails come up at the end. But again, specific personal questions you might want to save for the inbox as opposed to this presentation. And then if there's an issue where you're not able to hear me or something, then please just use the chat box to make us aware. But hopefully nothing like that will happen. Right. So here's a little overview of what we're going to be covering today. So I'll give you a kind of general overview of what we're looking for in a candidate and our application deadlines. And then Akbar will take us through in more detail some of the academic requirements, what we're looking for in your employment history, GMAT, GRE scores, English requirements, the essay, the CIRA Talent Video Interviews, your letters of recommendation, and then I'll sort of summarize what we're looking for in your application checklist and what you need to be careful with there. And then we'll finish with potentially a half an hour of Q&A. Oh, and I see something in the chat, but that's all right. I think that's been sorted. So the MAFE is a 2-year part-time course, which is a hybrid course. So it's mostly online and can mostly be done in your own time at your own pace to some extent, with 4 in-person residential periods, the first of which is a bit longer than the rest of the residential periods. So it gives you kind of the best of both worlds in the sense that you can continue working while you do this degree. You can do it from where you live, yet you get to have that in-person Oxford experience, the college experience, and you get to meet up with your cohort in person. So it really does offer the best of both worlds in that sense. This program is designed to build on your existing experience in finance, uh, or consulting if that's your industry. So we're generally looking for mid-experienced professionals, so those with up to 7 years of experience in finance, consulting, or a related sector. That number is it's somewhat flexible. If you're right on the cusp of that sort of 7 year limit, this would be the kind of case where you'd want to get in touch with Joe, the head of recruitment, and he can discuss your candidacy in a bit more detail. But this is sort of generally what we're looking for in terms of experience. This program has an applied focus, so this is designed to fit in well with your current work, and should be it should be closely related to the work that you're doing, and again have quite an applied focus to it, less theoretical than some programs. And just to show you some of the deadlines that we've got for this year. So we've already passed the first two stages of admissions, but the stage three deadline is the 22nd of May, and then you would need to have your recommendations and your CIRA completed by the 29th of May, and all of those deadlines fall at just before midnight at UK time. These deadlines haven't been determined yet exactly for next year, but they're likely going to be a bit earlier in the year. So keep an eye on that. We will post that when we know the exact deadlines, but they are likely to be a bit different next year. Right, and just to talk a bit about what we're generally looking for, and then I'll hand over to Akbar and he can talk a bit more about the specifics of what we're looking for in your application. But first and foremost, we're looking for applicants with strong intellect. So you're going to show us this through your academic history, so how you've performed at undergraduate level, perhaps you've done another master's, and you've got strong results at that level. We're looking for signs of independent thought, so signs that you are able to think for yourself and come up with new ideas. We're also looking for a strong career plan and how you aim to use the MAFE to uh, to progress your career. So the essay is very much focused on this and how you intend to progress your career. That's what we want you to talk about, sort of the next 5 years. And we also want to see that your current work experience leads to what you want to do next. So there needs to be a sort of connection there with the MAFE sitting at the center of how you plan to connect your current work experience with what you want to do in future. And finally, we're looking for excellent soft skills, communication, collaboration, leadership, stamina. This may be displayed somewhat through your essay, but in large part, you're going to show this to us in your CIRA video interviews, telling us about the experiences you've had and yeah, proving to us that you are a great communicator, that you know how to lead, that you've been through these sorts of experiences before, and you know how to deal with these sorts of issues. Right, I'm going to hand over to Akbar now, and he's going to go through the academic requirements next.
Thanks very much, Daniel. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all doing well and welcome to the webinar. I'm just going to talk through the academic requirements and the specific requirements for the MAFE program. So, firstly, you would require an undergraduate degree with the equivalent of a first class or strong upper second class honours with an equivalent in the UK system. So, for example, if you have a GPA of 3.5 out of 4 on the 4-point scale in the US system, that would be an equivalent to a first class or strong upper second class, depending on how you've scored. So you can check the university's guidance on the University of Oxford website for the specific international qualifications. In addition to that, you can also email us, as in the admissions team, to confirm the requirements if a specific country is not listed. So you're more than welcome to email us, and we'll be happy to look into that for you to give you an equivalency, just to ensure that you do meet the academic requirements in terms of the undergraduate degree. We say that no particular subject or discipline is required. However, the degree is highly quantitative, so there's no requirement to have studied economics or finance, so do bear that in mind. Please also note that higher national diplomas are not accepted when assessing the MAFE, an application for the MAFE programme. And please also make sure to complete the qualifications section of the application form, and you can select, it gives you a drop-down list, and you can select the nearest subject on the drop-down menu. In addition to that, what we do require is a copy of your final transcript. So a copy or a copy of your latest transcript if you're still performing your degree, and if you have not yet completed it. So an interim transcript would be required if you are in the final year of your degree. We would need to see the individual module results thus far and confirmation of enrolment letter if a master's degree has only just begun. So some of you may have just started a postgraduate degree, a master's degree, so we would just require an enrolment letter as part of the application. And you can also upload under relevant qualification via the status page on the portal, on the application portal. Moving on to the next slide. So in terms of work experience, for the MAFE program, it's for candidates who have up to 7 years work experience in finance, consulting, or related industry. Ideally, candidates will have at least 2 years full-time work experience in finance or consulting. However, this is not a strict requirement. If you do have slightly more than 7 years work experience, then by all means do get in touch with us. You can get in touch with Joe, to head of recruitment, to discuss your candidacy. And it's the same for candidates who may be just on the cusp of having 2 years full-time work experience. Again, ourselves and Joe can have a look at your suitability for the MAFE program if you fall within that category. In terms of employment history, so you would need to provide a CV. So you would need to add the most recent role first, and within that you can include all relevant internships in your CV and in the employment history section. The next part is define your current role. So only complete this if you are currently in full-time employment. Otherwise, you can leave that blank. And as mentioned earlier, if you could upload a CV, it would need to be ideally 1 page, but up to 2 pages is accepted. And again, if you could just highlight your most recent role and any previous internships that you may have undertaken. There is a template on the portal, so should you need any help with that, you can download that, which is available. Moving on to one of the other requirements, which is the GMAT or GRE scores. So at the top of the slide there, you can see the recent average scores admitted for MAFE students. So the GMAT 10th edition, that's no longer available. However, we still accept some of those scores within this transition period. But there you can see some average scores. So the GMAT Focus, an overall score of 711. The GRE quantitative score is 168, with the GRE verbal at 166. So that just gives you a kind of flavour of what the average scores are. And yeah, we do advise you to aim as high as possible. So as the programme is highly quantitative, so that is a requirement. Again, there's no preference between the GMAT or GRE. We accept both. Like I said, the 10th edition still accepted during this transition period. You would have need to have taken your GMAT or GRE test within the last 5 years. So scores which are valid from September 2021 or later, we would consider those. There's no, like I said, there's no minimum scores, but we do advise you to score as highly as you can. But remember, the program is highly quantitative and analytical, so that's our kind of party line when it comes to advising you on the GMAT and GRE requirements. The official scores must be sent to the admissions team, and there's two ways you can do this. So you can provide the official PDF score report. So we require the screenshot with your details and scores on there. And you can also share the official scores via mba.com if you've taken the GMAT test, or the ETS portal if you have taken the GRE test. And just a personal plea, as soon as you get those, if you could share those scores with us, that would be great, because until we have those scores, your application would be at a halt. So yeah, it just gives us the opportunity to progress quickly with the application process once you share those scores. And finally, on this slide, you must do both of these by the application deadline. So you must submit either the GMAT or GRE scores by the application deadline, which Daniel mentioned earlier. Moving on to the next slide. So now just going to talk a little bit about English proficiency. So there is an English requirement for the MAFE program. You could be entitled to a waiver or an exemption. So for example, if you're a national of one of the following countries, which you can see on the slide list highlighted in yellow, if you are a national of one of those countries, you could be entitled to an English waiver, which would mean you wouldn't need to take, for example, an IELTS test or a TOEFL test. But your first language must be in English, and you must have been living in one of those countries above for most of your life. So if you are unsure, if you have any specific questions relating to that, by all means, you can email us, and we can also look into that for you, whether you would be entitled to an English waiver. There is also something called an academic waiver. So if you have completed your a full-time degree, which is at least 9 months long, and completed no earlier than May 2024 for 2026 entry, so within the last 2 years, you could be entitled to an academic waiver. However, all the courses, modules, and exams must have been conducted in English. And again, sometimes this is highlighted on the transcript or a letter. So you could provide that to us. You could upload the transcript and letter from the university confirming the language of instruction. And if you do meet those criteria, then yes, you would be entitled to an academic waiver. So therefore, you would not need to undertake an English language test. There is also, finally on this slide, there is also a professional waiver. So if you've worked at a technical advanced level for at least 2 years in one of the countries above, again, you can provide some evidence of, if you can provide some evidence of that, you could be entitled to a professional waiver. So you must have used all 4 language components, so reading, writing, listening, speaking, and work experience completed. That work experience must have been completed no earlier than 2024. So again, it must be within the last 2 years. And again, if you can provide some evidence of that, that would be great. And we can, give you an English waiver based on that. So just moving on to the requirements. If you are not eligible for either of those previous waivers which I mentioned, then you would need to meet the English language requirements and prove your English proficiency before joining the program. So you would need to take a secure English language test and then submit the scores with your application. If successful, you can take the test as a condition of the offer. So we could add that as a condition if you've not yet taken an English language test. So tests must have been taken in September 2024 or later for 2026 entry, and the scores must have been achieved in one sitting. So you can't take multiple tests. You have to have taken the test in one sitting alone. There are minimum scores overall and for all components, so reading, writing, listening, speaking. And just to highlight, the tests that we do accept are IELTS academic, so not the IELTS online test, IELTS academic, which is one of the most common forms of tests which candidates do take. Then the TOEFL tests after 21st of January of this year are not accepted. However, tests that were taken before this date, we would still consider. There is also the Cambridge Advanced and the Cambridge Proficiency, and also the Oxford Test of English Advanced, Oxford Test of English Advanced test, which is also one of the secure English language tests you could take. So there are different options there for you to consider, but the most common one would be IELTS. In terms of, you would need to provide an admissions essay, and it's based around what attracted you to the MSc Applied Financial Economics and how do you think the program will enhance your career over the next 5 years. So we do require an essay, maximum of 500 words. However, you can slightly go over by 10%. We advise to avoid focusing on past experiences or achievements. So what you would be required to do is concentrate on the present and future. So where you are now and where do you want to be in 5 years' time. We'd like you to demonstrate in your chosen program demonstrate research in your chosen program inside business school. And also one of the other themes to cover would be how is the MAFE going to take you from your current role to the next step in your career? So it's all about forward thinking, what you're doing now and where you intend to be within the next 5 years. And then moving on to the next slide. So another part of the application process is the CIRA Talent Video Interview Assessment. So after you submit your application, usually within 24 hours, you would receive a link, which can be found on the status page on the portal. And the CIRA deadline is 1 week after the application deadline. So here is what you'll need a webcam, and so where your answers would be recorded. So you'll be provided with 6 questions, 5 shorter verbal responses. You have 30 seconds to practice and then 90 seconds to record your answer. And then at the end, there is one longer verbal response where you have 30 seconds to practice and 2 minutes to record. So you do get some practice time within that period. And yeah, best advice would be to answer as honestly as you can. They're based on competency-based questions, and what I would advise is to avoid reading from a script, because we can tell when candidates read from a script. So please do avoid that. Yeah. So one of the focuses is to make sure that your personality shines through. Hesitations and brief pauses are fine. We completely understand. Sometimes you may need a bit of time. Do make notes during the practice run, but do not, like I said, do not write a script. Using AI to produce your answers will disadvantage your application. So again, don't use that. That's another thing to avoid. Remember to give evidence, examples for each answer, because we will be looking at that when it comes to scoring your CIRA Talent answers. And certain questions will ask you to demonstrate awareness of financial economic trends. None of these questions are particularly technical, but that usually is one of the last questions where you're asked a question about financial and economic trends. Moving on to the next slide. And finally from me, so we do require letters of recommendations. When you apply, recommendation link is sent by email. When you click send to the recommender, do contact the admissions team if a referee cannot receive the recommendation link, and then we can reach out to them in order for them to provide a recommendation letter. Referees must complete multiple choice survey in addition to providing a recommendation letter. So that's based on your competencies, and then you can upload the letter of recommendation. So the deadline for receiving recommendations is 1 week after the application deadline for your chosen round, so which we're currently moving into stage 3. We recommend at least 1 academic reference, 3 academic or 3 professional references is fine. If you're currently studying, 1 referee must be an academic at your home institution. Excuse me, if you give me a second. No personal email addresses, so no Gmail or Hotmail. It would have to come from an institution email address, and no family or friends. And choose people who you know well, not necessarily the longest. So that's all from me. And yeah, like I said, happy to take any questions at the end.
Thank you, Akbar. So yeah, we're nearly through to Q&A now. But just a final note, this is really important. When you've submitted your application, you will get through to this bit, this application checklist. And it's really important that your checklist has all green ticks by the deadline. So, of course, the CIRA and the letters of recommendation, the deadline is a week later than the application deadline, so you wouldn't need to have provided those by the application deadline. But be aware of the deadlines and make sure you have all green ticks and no red crosses. Um, if you have any red crosses or something's not working the way you expect it to, just email us and let us know. Um, Usually we can sort that out. Even if it's shortly after the deadline, we might be able to help you out. The issue really comes if you email us 2 weeks down the line and we've already processed all the applications, then you're likely going to be out of luck and pushed into the next stage or potentially the next year if you apply in stage 3. It's also worth noting that anything you upload generally takes it usually takes probably 10 to 15 minutes to upload, but it can take up to 30 minutes depending on how busy the server is. So just give give the system time whenever you upload anything. And also, when you complete your CIRA, that will not show up on the application checklist for a little while, just because it takes time for the CIRA platform to communicate with our admissions platform. So don't panic if you do your CIRA at the 11th hour, 9 o'clock before the application deadline or the CIRA deadline. That's going to be fine. Even if it's not a green tick by the deadline, we'll see that you did the test before the deadline. So no need to panic. But I would say do your CIRA before 9 p.m. on the CIRA on the CIRA deadline day. Um, right. That concludes the presentation. Here we've got two email addresses listed here. So we've got Joe's. So if you've got any questions about sort of whether you're a good candidate for the MAFE, Joe is the person to get in touch with. If you have questions about the sort of technical aspects of your application, then get in touch with us in admissions. So great, that is the end of the presentation. So we'll now open up the Q&A. Let me. It looks like should be open now. So please feel free to write in any questions you might have.
Yeah, Q&A box is open now. So any questions, yeah, like Daniel said, feel free to type them and yeah, happy to read them out.
And yeah, Joe, maybe we've sort of introduced you, but why don't you introduce yourself as well and just say hello? Yeah.
Yeah, will do. Thanks both. Really great job. Really, really informative session. Great to get an overview of the program and the application process. Yeah, I thought I'd jump on and say hi. I can see lots of familiar names from people I've spoken to. So nice to see that you've joined the session. Yeah, if there's anything you'd like to discuss in terms of specifics relating to your profile, experience, suitability for the program, reach out if we haven't been in touch already. Really happy to set up a one-to-one consultation. We can have a chat and discuss the program in more detail, your experience and how it aligns with your learning objectives, because you want to make sure that you're joining the program that's the right fit for you. So really, really happy to do that. Also in the chat, I will just share there's an event coming up that we have on the 6th of May. That's a really good kind of follow-on from this session. It's really designed as a faculty masterclass and like a taster of what kind of the academic sessions will be like on the program. It's with Shumiao Ouyang, who's a professor of finance, and he'll be leading this session. So I will just post a link in the chat now for anyone who hasn't already registered. I would highly recommend registering and joining that session, and then keeping an eye out for any other future ones that are coming up over the next few months, because there will be ones for you to join. So yeah, I hope that's helpful as well. But yeah,
Nice.
I think from my side,
Yeah.
yeah, just to reiterate, if anyone wants, to have a discussion and we haven't already, please reach out. If we've already been in touch, just let me know how I can support as you're going through the motions over the next few weeks and months. Happy to support.
Great. We have a question, so I'll read it out, and perhaps I can try and give some insight into an answer. And Joe, maybe you can also give your thoughts on this as well. So there are certain internship opportunities that are full-time in nature and structured as an annual contract. It's just that the designation is termed as an intern instead of, let's say, a junior analyst. Will such experience be counted towards full-time work experience? Um, I don't know how you would look at that, Joe, and I mean, I can maybe answer from the admissions side. I would say uh, if it's full time in nature and it's an annual contract, I would say in the application form you can put that down as full time experience. I don't know what your thoughts are, Joe.
Yeah, I would agree.